What if your fertility isn't a timing problem, but a safety problem? In this episode of Reproductive Rebel, we are talking about one thing that almost no one is addressing in the reproductive health space: your nervous system. Because you can track your cycle perfectly, take all the right supplements, and do everything right, it still feels like your body isn't cooperating. But the truth is, the body doesn't open under pressure. It opens under safety. And if your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, whether from stress, overworking, emotional suppression, or just living in a constant state of go, your body will deprioritize reproduction, not because it's broken, but because it is wise. This episode is your invitation to shift from forcing into receiving, from control into regulation, from survival mode into creation mode. Because fertility isn't something you chase. It's something your body allows when it finally feels safe enough to receive it. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are. I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am so excited to be joined by Christina today. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to discuss this topic that we're so passionate about. Honestly, we had to basically force ourselves to press start because we were just getting into it already.
Absolutely. So before we get into, because I know Passion's going to take this conversation and run with it, can you share with our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Christina. I am an integrative psychotherapist at Begin Within Today, and I am super passionate about the mind, the body, the spirit, and how it is applied and vital in all ways, shapes, and forms to basically everything.
Absolutely. And it dovetails beautifully with the trip that we are going to go on today. So if you are thinking about becoming pregnant, if you are thinking about the preparation process to become pregnant, this is absolutely a conversation you are not going to want to miss. So just before we hit record, we were talking about influencer accounts that tend to stir up hornet's nests with our clients and really send them into a panic that is unnecessary, unhelpful, and really not going to support their overall fertility journey.
Or motherhood, right? In this case of, and the one that came up was caffeine. Doctor had said any kind of caffeine could essentially cause alcohol fetal syndrome in the fetus, which we know is not valid, not true. However, how does someone feel reading something like this who's already had their baby? How do they consciously think about it in a way that they're not affected? Did I affect my baby? Did I cause detrimental harm? So we're talking about the shame spirals, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, are they just trying to shock the audience for likes? Because when I see something that feels like it's shame forward without either a solution or, try this supplement will help, or take my course. It feels like the marketing is just entirely shame driven to make you feel bad about yourself and whatever you've done, or guilt tripping you so that you will do something else for marketing purposes. I am just so burnt out from it, both as a provider and a consumer, because, I've been on my own healing journey for so long. I don't think it'll ever stop, and so I'm on the other side as well, consuming this, and I'm over it. How about that? I just want to say that.
I am too. I get very frustrated with large influencer accounts that have thousands of followers, not necessarily because of the quality of their content, but because they're good at playing the marketing game. And they have a team that helps them to play the marketing game, and they have big enough pockets that they can play the ad game. Right. So this is how these accounts get in front of you. And there's a lot of information that isn't true, isn't backed up. There's so much out there that is rage bait, clickbait kinds of things. And, our medical model as a whole really thrives off of making people feel broken, and the model is there to fix it, kind of like a mechanic. Right. Yeah. So when these things are positioned, we spend so much of our time, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, feeling like we are something that needs to be fixed. We are broken, and we are a project that requires intervention in order to function appropriately. Would you agree with that?
100%. And I feel that like what they're targeting or feeding off of is the disconnection that we have from our bodies, especially as women, from our truths, from our intuition. If we grew up in a household, including myself, where self-doubt was there, I could not trust my thoughts, my feelings, from a young age. If that continues on, right, in a dysregulated state, and someone's telling me I'm continuously doing something wrong, where am I going to go? I'm going to trust, especially if it's a doctor posting this, they must know what they're talking about. They know what's right for me. So I should then do what they're telling me to do. Like, I am wrong, they're right. Like, we're essentially continuing this familiar hell, if you will, of a dynamic of this person knows me, my body, my truth better than I do. And man, it's a lot to unravel, unpack, and to heal, to unlearn, and to ultimately heal, because you listening, watching, know your body better than anyone else possibly could. It's a matter of recreating that, or creating sometimes for the first time, a relationship with it, to communicate with it, to believe it, to trust it, to know it. Mm-hmm. But it's a process.
It totally is. And the thing that I tell my clients all the time is that your intuition, your body knowing, never lies to you. It's probably the only thing in this world that will never lie to you. And often it will respond and communicate with you before your brain ever catches up. This is how like your body will move out of the way of something like an oncoming car or a threat. And it happens so fast that all of a sudden your brain is like trying to scramble and catch up with what just happened. Right. But the body perceived a threat. The body moved you out of the way. And then your brain is left like to catch up with this whole experience. And, I have had this kind of conversation with people who have had miscarriages, where their body is like in the process, and it happens so quickly that like the body completes the process, and then the brain catches up and goes, oh my God, this is what just happened. So your body is brilliant. It is brilliant. And it will never, ever lie to you. So when you see some of these posts, when you hear some of these things, like if there's a little piece of you that goes, I don't know if I believe that, trust that. It's the thing that catapults you for a second opinion. It's the thing that nudges you in the direction of things that feel more aligned to you, whether it's an approach to an intervention, whether it's the story that you tell yourself about the need for intervention, like in your body. And it's so hard to quiet the mind. The monkey mind can be really a busy place, but your body will tell you what it is that you need to know. And particularly when you're on the fertility journey, that is the part that is honestly the hardest, because we have been saturated in this non-trusting of the body for so long. And fertility is one of those aspects where we actually have to really surrender to the brilliance of this body that we live in. And you're stuck in this push-pull, like, oh, well, maybe I didn't, plan my caffeine intake really well that day. I had a cup of coffee and I had no idea later in the day I was going to have chocolate too. Both of those things have caffeine in them. Maybe I had too much that day. And then you start to spiral, right? And so there's a lot there that, I released a blog about this not that long ago. So if you haven't read it, go check out my website. It's about the fact that there's an amount of surrender that comes with the fertility process, but this go, go, go in our brain and in our body actually is counterproductive in the fertility journey. So for people who spend like inordinate amounts of time researching things, and then they get conflicting information, and then they don't know who to believe, and then they have information overwhelm. I see this all the time in my practice, where it's like, well, this account said this, and this practitioner said this other thing, and now I have 5 practitioners in the mix, and they're all saying different things. Now my nervous system's completely overloaded, and I'm stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. That is going to work against the natural conception process. So, as a specialist in how nervous systems work, how do you see it in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I loved and agreed with everything you mentioned and you said. And before we hopped on, right, we were talking about how this information impacts the nervous system. Like, I have my clients look at every facet of their life to see how their nervous systems are impacted, right? So if you're receiving information, whether it's live from a practitioner, doctor, whoever, or via Instagram, and you notice your heart racing, like you feeling that fight or flight sensation on any level or form, that might not be in alignment with you and your desires. Like if it's putting you into basically a fear-based response, that might not be it. If you're walking away feeling empowered, like, oh, this is amazing. I feel like, yeah, I want to try this out in a way that feels more balanced and harmonious and helpful. Like that could be something, because there is also a lot of beautiful information being shared online too. And I just notice even for myself, like what I'm attuning myself to, like when I see a lot of fear, shame-based, problem-focused instead of solution-focused, click, because it's clickbait. It is what sells. Let's be real. If something shocks you, AKA causes that fight or flight response, they're probably getting way more comments and likes. That's why some of the people who I respect and love the most online often have the least amount of, not always, but a lot of times don't have very much interaction, followers, etc. Because I'm like, it's not clickbaity. It's actually really lovely and helpful and balanced. But when we look at the nervous system, like, again, we were talking about this earlier, like for me, from a holistic or integrated practitioner level, the nervous system to me is the most important piece, be it in, talk about the chronic illness part, a later episode, but whether it's healing chronic illness, fertility, or frankly, anything else, it is such an important aspect. If your body perceives it is constantly in fight or flight, and it is being fed more to convince it's in fight or flight, you are producing a lot of cortisol. Think of chronic cortisol. What does that mean? Chronic stress response. What does that mean? Cortisol will affect your immune system function. It will affect your autonomic nervous system function. It will affect, we were talking about the TCM, traditional Chinese medicine perspective, it impacts your organs, and you can speak to that in a moment, but it will start to affect every part of you. There's no doubt about that. So being mindful of what you are feeding yourself, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. What are you consuming on, whether it's television, Netflix, Instagram, I don't care where it is, being mindful. Is this nourishing me or is this dysregulating me? Is it essentially toxic to my system? Being just so discerning and mindful about that, because finding something that puts you into a shame spiral, to me, is going to be more impactful than whatever thing they're shaming you about. Like, I'm sorry, caffeine or dysregulated nervous system. I think I'm going to go with the dysregulated nervous system being more problematic than you having some caffeine during your pregnancy every day. Plus, a lot of cultures, we talked about this too, actually promote drinking caffeine on a regular basis for pregnancy. So like truly following your intuition, your nervous system, and what feels right, feels empowering, feels like nutrient dense and nourishing to you. You know what that feels like. Only you know. I'm not in your body, but if you were to tap into it, you have a feeling of what that is. But yeah.
Yes, all of this. So my blog that I referenced does speak to this a little bit. There's two of them. There's one about the fertile void and the other one about cold wombs and hot lives. But it speaks to this, like your primal brain that it can only handle two things, survive or procreate. And if it is in survival mode, you have to think about like caveman days, right? If you are being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, that is not safe for you. It is definitely not safe for the future of the species. Your body will shut that down until it's safe to have a baby, because babies are defenseless, right? So like our body understands this at a really primal level. Well, in today's world, our nervous system can't tell the difference between 100 unanswered emails and actually being chased by the tiger. And this speaks to your point that it has everything to do with, are you in fight or flight or fawn, freeze, right? Like, is your nervous system feeling like it's under attack in some way? And is it trying to get you away from the threat? And so, you know, this is where that information overload piece that I was talking about will do exactly that. You know, and it's so, so common when people are struggling to get pregnant too, that they're like, there has to be a reason why this is happening. I'm going in search of that reason. I mean, I am guilty of this. I built a practice on this, guys. So like, I am not saying this from a place of I've never had this lived experience. I have, and I understand the desperation that comes with it. I understand the fear that you might not ever be able to do the thing, right? Like there's so many emotions that come along with it. And this is why we do the research and we look and we read and all of these kinds of things. But we get to a point where there's so much that's happening in this, you know, big, beautiful brain of yours that we start to lose touch with this vessel that we are embodying. And that affects the way that our nervous system responds. The more space you can create in your schedule, in your life, in your mind, and play, joy, do things that light you up inside, that is what's going to make your body feel safe. And that will allow for conception to happen. And this isn't just a woman thing. Okay, I have seen some scary numbers on men's semen analyses in a really short period of time. And there is data out there. We are at a critical mass point for male fertility factor as well, where the minimum threshold for fertile sperm counts has gone down. The minimum used to be a sample size of 20 million. Now it's 15 million. Under 15 million is considered suboptimal. Motility and morphology, like they might be moving, but they're not progressively motile, meaning moving in the right direction. Like it's terrifying. Okay, so this constant stress environment, women tend to do a little more of the bookish research side of why is it that my body isn't quote unquote doing the thing. But men are shouldering a lot of stress too. Their lifestyle with how hard they're being expected to work, how little time, at least in American culture, right? Like we do a dismal job of taking vacation time. Like, let's be real. So like there isn't a balance between being on and allowing your nervous system to turn off. So I recommend to all of my clients when they are even thinking about having a conversation around fertility is to have a semen analysis done and to sit with somebody like me, or, really take a good look at what does their period look like? What are they seeing for PMS symptoms ahead of time? Because that's where the body speaks. So testosterone and progesterone are very much more like self-centered hormones, and estrogen is the community-centered hormone, right? So when we're in that progesterone phase, the things that make us irritable and angry and short-tempered and want to cry all the time, those kinds of triggers actually are a reflection, at least from my training perspective, is the emotional and energetic stuff that needs to be addressed. Where do I not feel seen? Where do I not feel heard? Where do I not feel safe? Maybe it's emotional safety in the relationship. And I want to witness anyone who is in a physical harm situation too, as I say this, but like any place, this could be financial, this could be emotional, this could be physical, like any place that you don't feel safe in this relationship will affect the expression of your menstrual cycle. So it really, to Christina's point, it really comes back to feeling safe in your system and having regulation in your nervous system. Your period will show you your baseline. Your semen analyses will show men's baseline. What has their lived experience looked like over the last 90 days? We get this beautiful organic computer printout once a month, and we get to see what it looks like. If we're skipping periods, that does say something about the safety in our nervous system. So, those are really foundational pieces in terms of where to begin when even thinking about the beginning of the conception journey. Because sure, there's tons of accounts out there that can tell you things like, make sure you're getting enough healthy fats like fish oil and avocados and like that type of stuff. Like, and that's all important. I am not discounting that. But people can get pregnant even in what clinically would be said as suboptimal conditions in terms of their diet. But it has to do with how they feel in their environment.
It makes such a big impact. And it's interesting, right? You were talking about like when we're doing all this research to figure out what it is we need to do to change something. What am I doing wrong? And you're just overloading your brain and your nervous system with this hypervigilance of trying to obtain as much information as possible, not realizing that you're subconsciously keeping yourself in that fight or flight response. So what we do is, like, especially as we spoke to the men and the women, but we've now recently learned that women, our nervous systems are regulated more so by a co-regulation and connection than anything else. Because it's oxytocin for us, that is what regulates our nervous system. Dopamine, serotonin to a degree, but it's oxytocin mostly for us. So again, going back to that partner and the environment we are in, do we truly feel safe and supported? Because if we don't, I'm not saying fertility cannot happen, because I've seen, horrible situations where, women still do get pregnant. I'm saying, though, it's not working as much for you as it would be if you felt safe. With chronic illness, healing goes on the back burner when you're in fight or flight. As all your brain cares about is getting away from that tiger chasing you, just needs to get you to safety. So everything else is on the back burner until your body goes, is it safe? Is the tiger gone? That's when healing can come to the front burner. And we do that with a lot of deep nervous system work. But that deep nervous system work must include what we surround ourselves by, our relationships, our environments. Every little piece is important in this. What makes you feel safe? And I know you and I have talked about this, like some people have never felt safe in their lives, but sometimes it starts with a relationship with a coach, with a therapist, with someone where you're like, okay, this is the difference. This is what my body feels like, and moving on from there. But just having that awareness of what we're feeding ourselves, literally and figuratively, can make a big difference. What are we taking in? What feels warm? What feels nourishing versus the opposite?
I know that when I was in the process of trying to get pregnant, that's when I pieced out of the news cycle. I had to. I just had
Mm-hmm.
to because there was so much negativity. And then there was all this, well, but this is fake news. And like, there was just too much. And it felt really heavy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
my husband became my newscaster because I'm like, just tell me the important highlights. Like, I just don't, because it's not that I didn't want to be an informed public, but it was the fact that we're currently in an environment of so much mudslinging that I'm just like, nope, I need to protect my peace. And like, I really like action movies. I love them. I used to be a combat sport fanatic. I'm starting to get too old for that at this point in my life, but I used to be a combat sport fanatic. And so like, I really like action movies with people like Jason Statham and, and they're fast and they're quick and they're up tempo. But that creates that kind of like, in your nervous system. I had to piece out of that stuff. So like sometimes there were pieces that brought me joy that I really had to sit with. How does this feel in my body? Do I find myself on the edge of my seat holding my breath? Or do I feel like I can like sit back into the couch and chill, right? Like, do I feel like I'm going to physically start moving my body along with what I'm watching? Or, can I relax into this? And I had to take inventory. And I want to kind of dovetail with what you were saying about feeling safe in your nervous system. A lot of it's the things that happen in the four walls of our head, too. We are locked into our head with that voice inside of our head. And if you're telling yourself that this isn't going to happen for you, why does it happen to other people, but it can't happen for you? That kind of voice feeds that shame and guilt system. And that is counterproductive to your nervous system also. And I'm not saying that it is not hard, right? What I'm saying is that those are moments to be reflective. If you find yourself starting to be like, oh, like this person got pregnant, this is never going to happen for me. Those are the moments to really take a step back and say, no, that's an old story that I've told myself, but that isn't actually reality. Or something to that effect, right? And this is your area of expertise where I would defer to you in terms of the kinds of things that you can fill that space in with. But the self-talk is a big part of it, because I see clients who are like, my mom struggled to get pregnant, so it's going to be my reality. My grandmother struggled to get pregnant. I have a lot of her attributes. I'm going to have the same story. I've been trying for 6 months and it's not happening. Not looking at the fact that they just came off of being on birth control for 10 or 15 years. And they're, the ACOG clinical definition of infertility, and I'm using this in air quotes for anyone who's actually listening to this rather than watching it, is trying unprotected for 6 months and not having a pregnancy result. Well, what that definition fails to define is without having had the influence of birth control. Because for some people that have been on hormonal birth control, ovulation will resume quickly. In some cases, maybe the medication wasn't even really effective. And either you can get pregnant on the birth control or you can get pregnant shortly after coming off of it. But that is actually far more rare, because birth control leaches your system of chromium, magnesium, selenium, zinc, B vitamins, like building blocks that your body needs in order to get pregnant. So when you have been on a hormonal birth control for whatever reason, chronic illness, right? Or you've been having issues with cycle dysregulation, and that is the only solution that your doctor offered you that wasn't surgical in nature. There's a million reasons, or just straight up, it wasn't the right time in my life and nobody taught me how to monitor my cycles, so I am terrified to get pregnant. Whatever the story is that you took it, there's no shame in that. But I just want people to recognize that being on a hormonal birth control will influence the time it takes to be able to conceive. So, you'll go to your doctor and say, I've been trying for 6 months. And they go, oh, you're having a problem. We're going to escalate you. And then you end up going to the reproductive endocrinologist. And then you end up having all the labs done. Often they will put you through pretty significant diagnostics like HSGs and things like that before they ever look at the male factor, right? It ends up being a very female factor focused model, which again feeds that voice in your head of there's something quote unquote wrong with me. Mm-hmm. But it really, we have such a strong birth control culture here in the West, and it is a class 1 carcinogen. Okay. That isn't usually what the doctor leads with when they say, well, we can put you on the pill. You have to actually look at the little black box warning in order to see this. So this medication influences the expression of your hormones and the communication in your hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. So if you've been disrupting this game of telephone for a period of time, it takes a little bit of time for the physical body to come back online and be able to successfully execute this hormone cycle. Well, and then to Christina's point, if your nervous system is dysregulated and you have this physical factor, of course it's going to take you a little bit of time. And honey, there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But it's so easy for that voice to come up in the head, right? The voice that only knows you, by the way. Only knows you, and recreating this relationship where it's like, no, this is temporary. This is my now. This is not my forever, whatever that means. And if this person got pregnant and I didn't, they're an expander. They're telling me it is possible. It is possible to heal. It's possible to get pregnant. Constantly reframing it for yourself, because your body hears every little thing you say to it. Has been scientifically proven that self-talk is so vital in the healing process, whatever journey you're on with that. So even if you say something negative to yourself, because you're human and we all do it, just following it up with hey, it's okay. I know I said that, and even apologizing to yourself. Would you say the things you say to yourself to a child? I always, like to ask that question, because the answer is likely not, right? Mm-hmm. That you would say that to yourself or to a child. And then, yeah. So really that self-love piece is very important, and working on that trust, the surrender, the acceptance, the forgiveness, all of it. And it is a journey. Mm-hmm. It is a journey. So, if you're on it, I'm so proud of you for being here, and I believe anything is possible at this. I've seen so much happen in my career up to this point, so I know that anything is possible.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about before we hit record was the epigenetics piece of this. And I definitely wanted to touch on this before the end of this episode, because, there is this really big misconception that if something is in your family line, you are doomed to experience it. And that actually goes back to what I was saying about my mother had a hard time to conceive. My grandmother had a hard time to conceive. These are now part of that internal conversation that we have. Well, because they did, I probably will too. Mm-hmm. So for people who are listening to this and are not familiar with epigenetics, can you share a little bit about what that is and why that would factor into this equation?
Yeah. So essentially, it goes both ways. So think of, if they say epigenetics spanned up to 14 generations. So if a trauma happened 14 generations ago, you can still feel it in your body, meaning it can turn on and turn off certain genes so that you can feel it up until this point. With that being said, you can also work to do the opposite in a positive way that impacts you and future generations to come, meaning getting your nervous system into a more flexible, regulated state, shifting your nutrition, shifting your environment. This can also switch on and off certain genes and how they impact you. And again, we talked about this, if we're back to the caffeine conversation, if something was going to impact, a fetus more, it's going to be the stress someone is in than probably what they're eating. And with that being said, these things can still be healed. That epigenetics continues. So we're not here to shame someone if they were in a stressful position during their pregnancy, because anything can happen at any time. Sometimes it is completely out of our control. And it really is an element of surrender, of hope and belief that we can shift things for the better. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, it's too late on that. It's not. It's never too late. You can always start your healing journey now. You deserve to feel safe in your body, in your relationships, in your environment. There's not an exact start date on that. You get to decide, if it's within your power of when that happens.
I really love that. I like to describe it to my clients too, as like you came in with a blueprint, but the expression of that blueprint really is up to you. So, while you come in with this genetic blueprint from, your family lineage, how you move through the world, how you choose to talk to yourself, what you nourish yourself with, both food as well as environmental. It's like that Buddhist concept of like taking care of the what's happening in the four walls inside your head and the four walls of your house. And like that is the part that goes out into the world. I very much subscribe to that in my house. And
I love that.
It's so important because like I sit here as a 42-year-old woman who is exponentially healthier mentally and physically than my 27-year-old self who gave birth to my first child, and some of it was the environment that I was in, and I got myself out of that toxic relationship. And my daughter physically has things that show up because of the stress that I was under during that pregnancy. And yes, I feel guilty about that. However, I am in a healthier environment. We are in a healthier environment. And there's a lot of co-regulation, as you were saying, that happens in the nervous system. I make sure that I am present with my daughter and I really listen to her and I make sure she feels seen and heard. And I can literally watch, because my daughter has eczema, I can literally watch her eczema when she is not at home. And then when she comes back and is in my home for several days, go from being quite red to very pale. So, I mean, there's a physical response that happens to nervous system regulation, and I can see it literally all over my daughter's body. So while there were things that I had no control over during her pregnancy, and I had quite a few pretty scary stressors during that period of my life, it doesn't mean that it's forever. It doesn't mean that you can't begin changing all of that. Once I got out of that situation, I made sure that we had as safe and co-regulated an environment as we possibly could. And she has blossomed into this amazing, intelligent, well-spoken, almost 15-year-old woman. And I am so proud of where she's come, but it has to do with how your body can show up when it feels safe.
Oh, I'm like getting teary, like hearing this story. I'm so proud of both of you. And like, I'm not surprised because look at her mom. I really hope anyone watching or listening to this hears that it's never too late to start your healing journey. You can shift that blueprint at any given moment for the better, for something more in alignment. And, these stories we tell ourselves or how we identify ourselves is so important because our body will follow suit via hormones. If we tell ourselves something positive, something is possible, we feel that hope, we feel that belief. That is just all of the hormones. We've got serotonin, we got dopamine, we got oxytocin, endorphins flooding the body as we consciously and then subconsciously choose things that are more in alignment with us, that feel better to us, that are more sustainable for us. When we go into a space of, some might say, a low vibrational space of, it's not possible, I feel so guilty. I feel so ashamed. I feel so this. I feel so that. Change does not happen in shame. It happens in love. I really believe this. We can't shame someone into changing themselves or something, including ourselves. So when we shift it to like, I trust that I did the best I could. They did the best they could with the knowledge, the information they had, even though it was horrible. It doesn't take away from it being horrible, but there's a level of, I'm not talking about, we don't need to forgive necessarily, but acceptance of ourselves, because we can't go back in time and change things as much as we want to at times. And I know I go there myself as well. But when we get to that level of acceptance, a shift naturally happens in the body. It really does. So again, back to like that. And when we see ourselves in this spiral of negativity, shifting it to something that feels better. Yes. And, reaching for what feels better. Yes, I was in a toxic relationship and my daughter was impacted, and I see where she is right now. And it is so beautiful. And I see where I am, and it's so beautiful. And in a way, this is the spiritual component. Everything happened perfectly. And we're at that level, that's how I feel. That's that post-traumatic growth piece that we sometimes forget to look at, where it's like our past is what brought us to this point right now. And it was just perfectly imperfect. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That piece, I think, is so important too, because if you think about our soul's journey here, we're here to learn. And we're here to grow. And the way that we interact with the world shapes that growth. I know that I have had trauma in my past, various kinds, and that those things made me who I am today. They built the house that I now live in. And I mean, it was horrible going through it in the time that I went through it, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. At the same time, I know that those things shaped me to be the woman that I am today, the mother that I am today, the practitioner that I am today. And I have a level of gratitude for how my life has forged me into the version of me that sits here today. And I also have had to give myself forgiveness for being in some of those situations, because we tend to go through the what ifs when that happened. Whether it's the trauma like miscarriage, because I've had 7 of those, what if I didn't do this? What if I didn't do that? Did I eat something? Whatever. All these things spiral through your head. It's the same thing in a domestic abuse situation. What if I hadn't said this? What if I hadn't done that? Like, would that have been the outcome? And really and truly being able to say, I did the best that I could. I showed up in my highest and best good, really shifts the frame. And you really have immense power over your lived experience. And it really has to do with this nervous system regulation and the stories that we tell ourselves. It affects every aspect of how your cells express themselves. They hear everything.
Yes, every little thing. And I think the bartering you met when we experience grief, the bartering that we do, right? In, what I could have, should have done versus I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at that moment in time.
Yep.
And I now have this new wisdom to share with other people, if and when they're ready to listen, or if I end up in a situation where I need to do something differently next time. I now have this lived experience, this lived wisdom for that. And, one other thing I wanted to also mention is some people ask me this, like, how do I know if, and you brought this up a bit, like my nervous system is in a good place with someone I'm working with or the friends I surround myself with, right? Because there's a lot of shame that can come up in mom groups, for example, online or in person. Wow, do I hear about those quite a bit? Or again, something that you see online. Pay attention to your breath. Is it easily flowing in and out? Or do you notice that it's shallow? Just start really tuning into your breath around certain people, places, things, and you will get a lot of information about that. Ideally, your breath feels deep, it feels calm, it feels harmonious. And again, I'll say it again, you deserve to feel that around everyone and everything.
I love this. So I could talk to Christina forever. We're like-minded souls, and it's just so lovely to connect
Refreshing.
with people that feel good like this. So if you were to leave our audience with a final thought, what would that be?
Healing is possible. Healing is possible. I believe it's possible for you. You've got this.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
if people wanted to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
beginwithintoday.com or at beginwithintoday on socials.
Beautiful. So if you are looking for a practitioner that sees you in the beautiful ways that Christina has articulated, please reach out to her. She is incredible. And thank you all so much. I recognize this episode has gone on a little longer than normal, but it's such an important topic. And whether this is a fertility journey, time in your life, or if you're just looking for the healthiest expression of your body, this is such a nourishing conversation. And I'm so glad that you stayed with us for this entire journey. And until next time, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at MoonEssenceMe on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.